You're listening to Tea with Tolkien, a podcast for the Hobbit at heart. We are on week 7 of our Silmarillion read-along. This week we will be discussing chapters 8 and 9 of the Quenta Silmarillion, of the Darkening of Valinor, and of the Flight of the Noldor. So things are getting pretty crazy. Of the Darkening of Valinor. That's chapter 8. Melkor secretly passed into the south. So you remember last week, or last chapter, depending on when you're listening to this, Melkor fled from Feanor, and no one really is able to find him because he secretly passed into the south, and he hid in the region called Avathar, where Ungoliant dwelt. Ungoliant agreed to help Melkor because he promised to give her, quote, whatsoever her lust may demand, which is honestly a big thing to promise someone, and I would definitely not make such a promise to anyone even half as scary as Ungoliant. But Melkor made this promise lightly, and he had no intention of giving her whatever she wanted because he thought, oh yeah, once I have the Silmarils, like, I'll be way too powerful and I will just, get rid of her or whatever. But anyway, so she agreed to help him. Melkor and Ungoliant came secretly closer and closer towards the light of the two trees. Now it was a time of festival, and the Valar and the Maiar, and most of the Eldar, were gathered upon Taniquetil. Even Feanor came at the bidding of Manwë. In that hour, Melkor and Ungoliant came, and together they smote and killed the two trees of Valinor. A great darkness fell upon Valinor. This darkness was more than a loss of light. It had a being of its own, which is terrifying. Manwë perceived that this was done by Melkor, and thus began a great pursuit. But the hosts of the Valar were blinded and dismayed, and made powerless by the cloud of Ungoliant. So as Ungoliant is going, it's really disgusting. She's like belching forth these just nasty, dark, vaporous clouds. It's just disgusting. As the chapter closes, Tolkien writes, but when the darkness had passed, it was too late. Melkor had gone whither he would, and his vengeance was achieved. That's, my gosh, that's crazy. Chapter 9 of the Flight of the Noldor. Now this chapter is nuts. I feel like a lot happens, and it's just like, if this chapter were made into some kind of motion picture, I feel like this chapter itself could be an entire movie because it's crazy. So as the chapter opens, everyone is realizing that everyone is kind of in the aftermath of the trees being killed. Yavanna is talking to the Valar, and she is like, listen, the light of the trees has passed away, and it lives only in the Silmarils of Feanor. Tolkien writes, foresighted was he. Even for those who are mightiest under Iluvatar, there is some work that they may accomplish once and once only. The light of the trees I brought into being, and within Ea I can do so never again. Yet had I but a little of the light, I could recall life to the trees ere the roots decay, and then our hurt should be healed, and the malice of Melkor confounded. One thing that I was thinking about is why didn't the Valar make any Silmarils beforehand? It's very weird to me that this isn't something that Aule would have done. Like it seems like something he could have done easily. I don't really understand. It doesn't make sense to me, Why did Feanor make them, but none of the Valar thought of it? Doesn't make sense. So the Valar are now asking Feanor to give them the Silmarils so that they could heal the trees. But it's not like he could just give them to them. They could use a little bit and give them back. What would have to happen is that I guess they would have to break the Silmarils. And that is not something that Feanor wants because, as we learned in the chapter before, or a couple chapters before, Feanor's heart is bound to the Silmarils. And so Feanor says no, which is a huge bummer to everyone. But what can you do? He said no. Honestly, if it were me, I would just grab them. Sorry, Feanor. But anyways, messengers came from Formenos with news that not only had Melkor killed the trees, he had also killed Finwë and stolen the Silmarils. So this is just blow after blow for everyone, and it's just not a good day. After this, Feanor cursed Melkor and renamed him Morgoth, which means the black foe of the world. So from this point on, we don't talk about Melkor anymore. His name is Morgoth. Feanor then ran and just disappeared into the night. So dramatic. Many of the people who were around grieved for the loss of Finwë and the Silmarils and the light of the trees of the Valinor. Just all in all, it's just a terrible day. Meanwhile, Morgoth and Ungoliant are working on escaping. They're kind of like shuffling away. And they come to this area called Ahriman, and it's just like a wasteland. Morgoth is trying to figure out how to ditch Ungoliant and get away. But she knows this because she's not dumb. And Ungoliant starts demanding to Morgoth, like, hey, listen, you told me you would give me whatever I wanted from both hands, and you haven't given me enough. So then Morgoth is like, what do you want? Like the whole world for your belly? He's kind of being a jerk. And so he has to give her all these gems that he has. And eventually he gives her all the gems. And she's like, no, I still want them. I still want more. And she wants the Silmarils. And after that, Morgoth kind of freaks out. And he lets out this giant shriek, this big cry that like echoes. It's just like the loudest, most piercing cry. And because of this, the Balrogs come to his aid, and Ungoliant escapes, but Morgoth is now free of her. After this, Morgoth forged for himself an iron crown in which he placed the Silmarils, and his power grew in the north. Back to Feanor, he came once again to Tirion against his banishment, and he began this big old great speech before the Noldor. His speech was honestly like a terrifying thing. If you were to like imagine actually being at a rally and someone standing up with this speech, like I would be pretty freaked out. It's not the kind of speech that I would like to listen to. He claimed kingship over the Noldor, first of all. And then he urged the Noldor to leave Valinor and to take dominion of Middle-earth, because Feanor has believed the lies of Morgoth that the Valar have kind of held the Eldar captive in Valinor so that the men might rule over Middle-earth. And so Feanor gives this really awful speech, just like saying that they need to go rule over Middle-earth and that the race of men is inferior to them, which I think is crazy. Then Feanor swore a terrible oath, and his 7 sons swore it alongside of him. Tolkien writes, "They swore an oath which none shall break, and none should take, by the name of even Iluvatar, calling the everlasting dark upon them, if they kept it not. And Manwë they named in witness, and Varda, and the hallowed mountain of Taniquetil, vowing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world, Vala, demon, elf, or man as yet unborn, or any creature, great or small, good or evil, that time should bring forth unto the end of days, whoso should hold or take or keep a Silmaril from their possession." Like, that is an insane oath to take. And the way that Feanor got everyone so fired up to the point that they were willing to take this oath is just like crazy and awful. Tolkien also mentions that Galadriel swore no oath, but she did desire to go to Middle-earth. So she's kind of going along with her kindred, but she didn't swear the oath, which was a relief to read. So the greater part of the Noldor agrees to leave Aman, but not all of them have agreed to take Feanor as their king. Many preferred Fingolfin for king, and so these 2 divided hosts then departed. Before they could leave, a messenger from Manwë came and urged them not to go, but Feanor is just like, I just feel like he's spiraling at this point, and he just laughed and brushed off the warning. Feanor then Feanor started out like totally without thinking this through. So he gets to this point where he's like, like, what should I actually do? And he decides that he's going to try to persuade the Teleri to join them and to aid them. But when he gets to Alqualande, they're like, no, this is a terrible idea, Feanor. We are not going to help you, and we are not going to aid you either. And instead of taking counsel from his friends, Feanor instead tries to take the ships by force. But they withstood against him, and so a bitter battle broke out, and this was called the kinslaying of Alqualande. And it's very, very sad. So you've got Noldor against the Teleri killing one another, which hadn't really happened before. And so it's just awful. After this, though, the Noldor take the ships, and they continue on. Along the way, the Noldor saw a dark figure who then cursed those who would not stay or seek the pardon of the Valar, but still Feanor was not dissuaded. In this hour, though, luckily for him, Finarfin forsook the march and turned back, and he was able to receive pardon from the Valar and ruled the remaining Noldor in the Blessed Realm. So honestly, that's so great for him. I'm so happy for him, because what awaits the rest of the Noldor is not fun. So once again, Feanor comes to another kind of like a crossroads in his journey, where they come to this point where they can't cross altogether. It's called the Helcaraxa, I think is how you pronounce it. So they aren't able to all cross together because they don't have enough boats. And so there's talk of, we'll take turns, we'll ferry one another back and forth, but everyone is very suspicious of each other already at this point. And so Feanor just takes a boat with his buddies who he thinks are good enough, like his loyal subjects, and they cross over. So they land in Middle Earth finally. And then when they arrive, hi. Really? That's so cool. I can see it when I'm all done. Sorry, my daughter just told me that she finished her Lego set, so I'm going to get to see it after this episode. Okay, so where were we? Upon their arrival, Feanor's son Maedhros asked Feanor, okay, Dad, now that we're over, how are we going to do this? How are we going to send back a ship to pick the rest of the people over? And Feanor is like, no, we're not doing it. And instead, he commands the ships to be burnt. So, gosh, what another awful choice. So the people that Feanor left behind is the host of Fingolfin, and they are just left in Eremen. Basically, Feanor left them there to die. But being very, hardy and having just come from the Blessed Realm, they weren't quite as, discouraged or weary yet. And so they had no choice but to endure the Helcaraxa, the Hills of Ice. After this, as the chapter ends, pretty much everyone is mad at Feanor, and no one is having a good time. And that's pretty much how this chapter ends. Tolkien writes, a small love for Feanor or his sons had those that marched at last behind them, and blew their trumpets in Middle-earth at the first rising of the moon. That's how this chapter ends. Everyone is pretty miserable. So that's it for this week. Next week, we will be discussing chapters 10, 11, and 12. There's 3 chapters next week just because they aren't very long and because stuff is starting to get more and more in-depth as we go. So I thought we could take next week to cover 3 chapters. That way we'll have more time to spend in the future on other chapters. Thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate you all being here, and I hope you're enjoying the Silmarillion so far. I hope that these kind of overview notes are helpful. And I would appreciate any feedback you guys have. If there's anything else you'd like me to do to help the book club along, to make things easier, I would love to hear from you. You can send me a tweet you can send me a DM on Twitter at teawithtolkien, or you can send me an email. There's a little contact form on my website, teawithtolkien.com. And with that, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you later.